Hello, everyone. Thank you to Safe Care BC for having me today. So the topic we're going to be talking about is understanding and coping with stress. As caregivers, stress affects us every day, and we're going to be talking about coping strategies and resources to help us navigate challenging times. Carissa already did the land acknowledgement, so I will be skipping that. So I will start off by talking about what is stress. Stress can be defined as a state of worry or mental tension caused by a difficult situation. Stress is a natural human response. We need to know that throughout our lives, every day we're going to be stressed, and it's inevitable. It actually prompts us to address challenges and threats in our lives. Everyone experiences stress to some degree, like I had mentioned, but the way we respond to stress actually matters. It can either break us or make us. It makes a huge difference to our overall well-being. So how does stress affect us? So stress affects the body and the mind. A little bit of stress is actually good, and it can help us perform daily activities. Too much stress can cause physical and mental health problems. Learning how to cope with stress can help us feel less overwhelmed and support our mental health and physical well-being. So a moderate amount of stress can actually be beneficial and even essential for personal growth and performance. So I know some of us might be thinking, so, what is so good about stress and why is stress good? So like I had mentioned, stress isn't always harmful. In fact, the moderate amount of stress, often termed eustress, can enhance performance. This kind of stress can increase focus, motivation, and energy levels, helping us meet deadlines and achieve our goals. Stress is not static, so we are constantly moving through different stages of stress, and it's different for every person. So the way I respond to stress is different from the way you all would respond to stress. So the goal is actually not to avoid stress. Rather, it is not to stay in any level of stress for too long. How do you identify when you're in a deep pit hole? How do you identify when you're stressed? And how do you get coping mechanisms to help navigate that? So as you can see here, I have the Yerkes-Dodson law, which suggests that performance improves with increased arousal, stress, up to an optimal level. So it actually shows that a good amount of stress is good for us to achieve our optimal potential. So what is good stress? So good stress actually promotes growth and adaptation. It helps us build resilience. So experiencing and managing moderate stress helps build resilience, overcome challenges, and adapting to stressful situations can strengthen psychological and emotional resilience. It also encourages learning and problem solving. So for cognitive benefits, take for example, stress can enhance cognitive functions such as problem solving and critical thinking. Say in the clinical setting, you're actually stressed out, you're trying to figure out how to navigate a certain situation, but because you have a little bit of stress, it actually helps you think better and think more critically. It also stimulates the brain's resources and forces you to think creatively to overcome challenges. I would say stress also boosts motivation. So take, for example, a manageable level of stress can increase motivation and drive. It creates a sense of urgency that encourages individuals to take action and achieve their objectives. Another point I would like to mention is that it actually fosters personal growth and development. So when you face and overcome stressful situations, you can actually get better in your personal development, you increase your self-awareness. It often involves stepping out of your comfort zone and discovering your new strengths. So how does stress affect the daily interactions of caregivers? So the first point I have here is impaired communication. So stress can lead to difficulties in clear and effective communication. So when you're under stress, you might actually find it very difficult to articulate your thoughts or follow instructions, potentially leading to misunderstandings with clients, colleagues, and families. Sometimes, when we're actually stressed in a clinical setting, we could get very snappy, very agitated. It could create tension, even though that's not our intent. But the way you respond to your coworkers could actually cause friction when you're stressed out. I remember there was a time when I was in a clinical setting, I had said hi to a care aide, and her response was, and I was like, "Hi, how are you doing? How are things with you?" And she flat out told me, "What is your business? Why are you asking me that?" And for a second, I was like, okay, I was actually just trying to check in and see how you're doing. And later on, she came up to me to say, "I'm sorry, Sosa. I've actually been very stressed out. I've been so stressed out with my personal life, and I actually didn't intend to take it out on you. I am very, very sorry about it." So I think it's very important for us to know how to, manage our emotions when we're stressed and when we feel like we've gotten to the point or to our breaking point. So stress also can actually lead to decreased empathy. I mean, as caregivers, it's very important that we are empathetic towards our clients, right? That's the number one, principle I would say or value when it comes to caregiving, being very empathetic, being able to see, people's situations from your own point of view. But however, if we're stressed, we're not going to be able to find empathy on a daily basis. Like I said, stress can reduce a caregiver's ability to empathize with others, so making interactions less warm and supportive for families and even members of your team. And actually, this also we see this in short staffing in healthcare. When you're stressed out, you can actually spend the amount of time you want to spend with your clients because you're stressed out. And when families actually, bring this up, it's quite difficult to navigate. Another thing stress does is emotional exhaustion and burnout. So, prolonged stress can lead to emotional exhaustion, which diminishes caregivers' ability to empathize with others. Emotional exhaustion is a key component of burnout, a chronic stress that affects interpersonal relationships. Also, I can say that when we're stressed out, we become very irritable, highly irritable, very snappy. So a coworker needs help, we become very unsupportive. They ask a question and we actually don't want to answer the question because we're so stressed out. I mean, if you're not at peace within yourself, it'll be so difficult to actually help other people find the peace that they need. So, like I said, high stress levels can lead to irritability or frustration, which may manifest in short or harsh responses during interactions. I don't want to say we've all been there, but I have been there. When you catch yourself becoming like that, what are the, you know, boundaries you put in place to prevent that from happening? Sometimes it might be just a quick 5 to 10 minute break. And if you're unable to seek help, right, just step aside, get your emotions and your thoughts together before you actually go back onto the floor to continue your work. Or you could also speak to your manager on the floor. I believe that most of us work in supportive environments. When we're faced with stressful situations, we can talk to our managers, you talk to your team. And I think it's very important to be vulnerable, let them know that you're struggling and you need help. And you should be able to voice your concerns when you are in that situation. Chronic stress can also contribute to burnout, causing caregivers to feel emotionally drained and less engaged with those they care for. I actually tell myself all the time, you can't actually pour from an empty cup. So you need to fill your cup on a daily basis. And we're actually going to talk about what it means to fill your cup on a daily basis. As a caregiver, we're so used to giving care to people, to clients, but how do we take care of ourselves? And that's a conversation we're going to have later on in this webinar. Also, when we're stressed, it could actually lead to reduced compassionate response. So we become less responsive to people's emotions or the emotions of our clients. I remember there was this one time where I had this one client who wanted the dad to be turned every hour, and the lady had brought up a concern, but because um, we're working in a very high stress environment, she didn't get like the care that her dad wanted, and also like the response that she expected. The care aides became very snappy, they weren't listening just because they were stressed out, right? So I think it's very important. It actually could impact the care that we give. So compassion fatigue. So high stress levels can lead to compassion fatigue, where caregivers feel overwhelmed and less capable of offering compassion and empathy to those that they care for. It could also cause a strain in interpersonal relationships. So stress often leads to strained interpersonal relationships, which can reduce the quality of interactions and empathy between caregivers and those that are responsible for clients. So when there's a strain in interpersonal relationships, working in a team where people don't get along is actually going to impact client care a great deal. As a matter of fact, research in self and identity found that stress can negatively impact the quality of interpersonal relationships, making it harder for caregivers to maintain empathetic connections. There's another thing that was actually quite mind-blowing when I was doing my research on this topic. Stress can actually affect our neurobiology, like the biology of our brain. It's the neurobiological changes. Chronic stress can affect the brain's regions involved in empathy, and those regions are the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. So, stress induced changes in this area can impair empathic responses when dealing with our clients. So, how can stress affect your overall effectiveness in the workplace? It can actually cause reduced cognitive function and decision making. So, high stress levels can definitely impair your concentration, your memory, your problem solving skills, and this can lead to mistakes, decreased ability to think, and slower decision making. And I mean, like as care workers, we try our best to provide the best quality of care for our clients. But when we're stressed out, it's going to be so difficult to actually like problem solve, to concentrate, to retain what we learn. So it's actually very important that we take these measures to reduce stress very seriously. It can also lead to mistakes. And the one thing you don't want to do as a care worker is make a mistake that will be detrimental to your patient or the quality of care that they receive. I'll give you an example about impaired cognitive abilities. So, as a nurse, I remember there was this one day where we're short staffed and we didn't have some nurses come in that were pouring, so like the med nurses, they all called in sick, and I was very stressed out as a RN on the floor. So, the one thing I did was I didn't pour the meds in that moment because I didn't want to make a mistake. I called management and I actually did seek for help because I needed the help at that point in time. So it's very important to identify those things. So like I said, it can actually decrease the quality of care we give to our clients. It diminished empathy, patient attentiveness, resulting in the decline of the quality of care provided to patients. It can also lead to absenteeism and turnover. So chronic stress can lead to physical and mental health issues, increasing absenteeism among caregivers. So when we're stressed out, we tend to call in sick more, right? And that actually affects the quality of care a patient gets. So it's actually very important to identify this. Also, increased absenteeism and turnover disrupts continuity of care and places additional strain on the remaining staff. I know we've all been there. When we're short-staffed, we sort of do twice the work that was supposed to be for everybody. It also causes emotional exhaustion and burnout. So stress can contribute to emotional exhaustion and burnout characterized by feelings of fatigue, cynicism, and reduced professional efficacy. It could also lead to increased risk of errors, right? And errors are not what we want to be making while we work with our patients. One thing about me, I don't know about other people, but when I'm chronically stressed, I do not do very well when I am in that state. So I always make sure to step aside for a couple of minutes as I am dealing with lives, and I do not want to make a huge error. It could also lead to decreased job satisfaction and motivation. We all went into healthcare for the passion that I will believe. I went into healthcare because I'm so passionate about being a nurse. I'm so passionate about helping people. I love what I do so much. And the one thing I do not want to be faced with is decreased job satisfaction and motivation. So how do we build resilience and effectively manage heavy workloads? Number one, I know we've heard this multiple times, but exercising regularly can definitely decrease your stress level, not increase, but decrease your stress levels. So when you exercise regularly, take for example, I actually do try to go to the gym 5 days a week. And I noticed that every time I exercise, each time I exercise, my thoughts are clearer. I noticed that I'm able to make better decisions. I'm able to have more impactful conversations. I'm able to, make better decisions at work. So exercise is very important. Another tip for building resilience is adequate sleep. As care workers, I really do hope that we get our sleep in a minimum of 8 hours a day. As a matter of fact, research from the National Heart, Lung, and Lung Institute shows that sleep helps your brain work properly. I love to sleep. I don't compromise on my sleep. My sleep is, if I don't have a good sleep, I don't think I can actually perform to my optimal level at work. So I make sure I get the most amount of sleep that I can get. Also, research from the National Heart, Blood and Lung Institute shows that while you're sleeping, your brain is getting ready for the next day. So it's actually forming new pathways to help you learn and remember information. Studies show that a good night's sleep improves learning and problem solving skills. Sleep also helps you pay attention, make decisions, and be creative. Study also shows that sleep deficiency changes activity in some parts of the brain. If you're sleep deficient, you may have trouble controlling your emotions, you may have trouble making decisions, and you might actually have trouble coping with change. So you'll be very resistant to change, which could actually, affect your professional life and your personal life. Sleep deficiency also has been linked to depression, suicide, and risk-taking behavior. Also, tips that we could use to, better manage our heavy workloads in healthcare. Healthy eating. We need to be conscious of what we eat. We also need to practice mindfulness and relaxation. For me, I feel like after a certain period of time that I have worked so much, if I feel like I'm getting to the point where I'm burnt out, I try to take some time off work. I try to go on a trip. I try to, just relax. So it's very important that we practice mindfulness, and mindfulness could look different for everybody. So take, for example, deep breathing, meditation, or progressive muscle relaxation to help manage stress. So you tend to you meditate, You take deep breaths. That works a great deal. You also take short and regular breaks during your shifts to decompress and reset. Because I think even taking breaks is so important. And I think it's something that we really need to highlight here, because working in healthcare, we could be so short staffed. There are times when we're so short staffed and we miss our breaks. But I think it's important that we try to take our breaks every time we work. When you take your break, you come back. If you feel like a brand new person, you come back with a brand new perspective. You should also seek professional support. I'm a huge advocate for mental health. I'm a huge advocate for counseling. I feel like when we're struggling, we should seek those resources that have been given to us through our various workplaces. You know, you should never keep like a mental health situation to yourself. We have those resources, seek professional help, speak to your counselor, and trust me, it actually does work. In my experience, it has worked a great deal. And also, we can also seek our social support, the people in our lives, our anchors. You could talk to them about whatever you're going through. Of course, you want to keep confidentiality where you work as well. Support groups are so important. And I say support groups are so important for caregivers to share their experiences. And the reason being, we can relate to our own experiences. But say, for example, you're talking to someone who, say, works in the field of finance, about the difficult day you've had at work. They might not be able to entirely relate to what you're talking about. But if you talk to someone in a support group and let them know, hey, this is what I am going through, or this is what I went through, it's very important, having those debrief sessions. I feel like, take for example, when I've had a very difficult day at work, sometimes I don't feel like I can really talk to some friends about what I went through, just because, or how I feel, right? Or how the situation has impacted me, because they do not work in healthcare. They don't understand my perspective. They have a very different perspective and view. So I think talking to someone who belongs to a support group, a nurse, a care aide, a care worker, a support worker, they definitely understand the reality, because we share similar experiences. Another big elephant in the room is a huge part of effectively managing your heavy workload is to prioritize and organize your tasks. This can definitely make you or break you when you work in healthcare. I remember when I was a student, my stress levels were way higher than they are now, just because organization of my tasks was something that I really needed to, get used to practice. And now I can tell you that now that I organize my tasks, I know which patient I'm seeing first. I know the patient who's on my priority list. I know the patient that I'm going to see last. It has been a game changer. I go to work feeling less stressed, knowing that I am in control of my day. Because when you know you're in control of your tasks, you have the tendency to feel less stressed, even when things go wrong. Because in healthcare, things don't always go as planned. But knowing that you have that level of control actually makes a huge difference. So take for example, when I walk into my workplace, I write down all my clients' names on a sheet of paper. I put a time stamp beside each client in order of priority and how I'm going to, conduct my day. I also put tasks on my sheet so I know, and I'm not missing out on any task. And it really does help you manage your time effectively. Like, you'll be so surprised. Like, when you're organized, your work becomes so much easier. Another tip is to communicate and collaborate. You want to discuss workload concerns with supervisors, your colleagues, to explore potential adjustments or support. I feel like we all should work at places where we're able to speak to our supervisors, our managers, regarding the concerns that we might be going through. And I feel like if you're in a workplace and you're not able to speak to your managers, your team leaders, your supervisors about what you're going through, I think you're actually in the wrong workplace. I think we all shouldn't be able to, advocate for ourselves, because if we're not our best selves, we are not going to be able to perform the utmost quality of care that can be given to a client. I remember there was a place I once worked and the team was so good. We would have like our meetings where we talk about our concerns, how we're feeling every day. And it was just amazing to know that I had that kind of support at work. Another point I'd like to talk about is time management. How do you plan your time when you go to work? You need to schedule your time wisely. I remember when I was in nursing school, my instructor would say, work smarter and not harder. It's so important to organize your time very, very, very wisely. So you want to plan your day to include dedicated time for both your work and personal activities, ensuring the balance between the two. So take, for example, you're at work, you want to plan your time to include your breaks, right? You also want to plan your time, allocate time for extra things that might come up during the day. So I think it's super important that we do that. I remember when I worked in urology gynae, I would when I did a night shift, I would make sure that I planned my time in such a way that if an emergency situation happened, how was I actually going to, still finish, my shift on time? Or say there was a last minute thing. When I say emergency, I mean like a last minute thing. Say a client needs something, they need to be changed. So how was I going to plan my time in a way that I would still finish my shift at the allocated time and I would still be able to give report to the oncoming nurse? So I think time management is a huge, huge thing um, when it comes to working in healthcare. Now I'm going to talk about addressing emotional challenges. So grief, as caregivers, we care for our clients, we have them for years, and the time finally comes when they pass away. And it's quite hard. I know we're supposed to maintain professional boundaries, which is good, but it's quite hard to not grieve a client that you've cared for many years. You've seen them almost every day of your life, right? So how do we navigate those feelings when we're grieving? The first thing, number one, we want to acknowledge our feelings. Allow yourself to grieve and process emotions related to loss or challenging situations. So there was this one time I had a client who had passed away, and the client actually passed away on my shift, and I had to go do the care and all of that, and it was quite a difficult situation for me. But I also had to acknowledge the fact that it was okay to feel that way, even though I wasn't related to this person. Because sometimes you might feel guilty, like, I'm just a worker. I don't know why I'm so attached. But I had to let myself know that it's okay to feel this way. I acknowledged my feelings. I did recognize them, and I actually did speak to my support networks, and they were able to also validate those feelings. So I don't think that I'm thinking about anything, out of the box. So support networks are so important when you work in healthcare. It's so important to have a strong support network. And if you do not have that, I encourage you today to join a social group. I personally have been able to lean on my family. I've been able to lean on my friends. I've been able to lean on support groups for emotional support during time of grief. I've also been able to lean on management too. When I was struggling, I had to let them know, like, hey, I'm struggling. This is really difficult, and I need help. And sometimes it could actually take just having a conversation with your manager or your supervisor, letting them know how you feel, and you definitely will feel better after doing that. And I do hope we all work in supportive places. So now the big elephant in the room, addressing emotional challenges, handling familial tensions. How do we do this? I think in healthcare, it's very important to set boundaries. It's so important to set boundaries with families, with clients. It's so important, very important. Um, I did have a situation that I said I was going to share today. I had a client who had asked me to call her just before her mom passes away. And she was very adamant about it. And she was like, if you know, my mom is going to pass away, you know, today because her mom was in palliative care. And she was like, please give me a call like 5 minutes before she passes away. And first of all, I knew she was grieving. I was empathetic towards her. She was grieving. She was not in the right state of mind because that's quite a huge request to make. Like, I can't predict when someone is going to pass away. So I had to pull her aside and have a conversation with her and say, you know what, like, I definitely understand that you're grieving, but I'm going to be honest with you. There is no way I will be able to call you 5 minutes before your mom passes away. What I could do is when I begin to see signs and symptoms and that indicate your mom is going to pass away, I can call you to come in, to spend the last few moments with her. But I won't be able to call you 5 minutes before she passes away. I also did have another client who had wanted me to take a blood pressure reading on the husband every day during my shift. And this was not indicated by the doctor. The husband was not hypertensive. This was just born out of fear. And I think she had gone onto the internet and done her own personal research. So I also had to set that boundary with her and tell her, you know what, you need to be able to trust me that I, care about your husband and I will provide the best quality of care that I can. But I don't think it's necessary. We can do checks, but not every day to actually, check your husband's blood pressure. I can see that you're concerned. Would you like to share your concerns with me? And also, just to get the team involved, I let my management know. I also let the doctor know so he could also have a conversation, with the client. But I could tell that setting that boundary worked because after that conversation was had, she gained more trust with me with our team, and we actually had come to a sort of, compromise on how care was, going to be done. If you wanted blood pressure readings, we could do it once a week, but we're not going to do it every day when it's not indicated by the doctor and when there's no doctor's orders for it and there was no indication her husband wasn't hypertensive as well. So, like I said, it's very important to practice effective communication with clients and their families, because this could definitely cause familial tensions when we do not practice effective communication. I've had situations whereby families will come up to me and say, "My mom wasn't showered at this time," or "My mom wasn't cleaned up at this time," and we sort of have to explain to them and let them know that, hey, we are not neglecting your mom. We're doing our best to care for her. However, this is a situation that has led to it. And we promise that we would keep our eyes on her even more. I also feel like, proper documentation. Another point is proper documentation is very important, especially when we're dealing with families. It's important to keep detailed records of caregiving tasks and family agreements. So you want to keep a records of the tasks that you do, which is, I mean, that's a standard for care. When you work in healthcare, we document every day, but I think it's important to document with timestamps. So, take for example, there's a critical review. You are definitely able to refer back to that documentation, critical incident review. You're able to refer back to that documentation, and you have the conversation that is required of you. So I think it's very important to document properly. And also let the higher authorities know what's happening. And I mean like your supervisors, your managers, the doctor on call or the doctor on the unit, let them know what is happening. Another actionable strategy to reduce stress is to have work-life integration. I know that as healthcare workers, we're constantly enticed with OT overtime, and because we're short-staffed and we also do care, about our clients, we want to work as much as we can. But I think it's very important to integrate a work-life balance. You work hard and you also play hard. You work hard, you also go on vacation. You work hard, you take time out to read a book, you take out time out to take a walk, you take time out to go to the movies, you take time out to spend time with your family, your friends. So it's so important to have an integration of work-life balance. You also engage in hobbies. Take, for example, myself, what I love to do, I love to bike. When I go biking at the seawall, I forget about all my problems. Like I'm so happy there. That's the place that I feel the most happiest. I love biking, I love reading. So those are the things that make me feel calm and they make me feel grounded. You should also, I think it's also very important that we do foster a supportive work environment. We need to advocate for resources. If you find that you're not getting the support you need at work, you need to advocate for it. You need to talk to your management about it. You need to speak up. We shouldn't be scared to speak up and, share our feelings and, our experiences. And if it's not working for you, you need to actually like advocate for that. And I think it's so important also that we create a very supportive culture at work, right? I know that there's some workplaces where people cannot come out and say, I'm struggling. It's difficult. This task is quite difficult for me. And I think because of the fear that they might get reported to management or they might get judged. But who cares if you get judged? I think what is so important is that you provide the best quality of care for your clients and also you feel safe where you work, right? And it all starts with us. It all starts with being, great team members. That when a coworker comes to you with a concern, you should be there to support and be like, hey, I can definitely, I see you, I see where you're coming from. I understand your struggles. How can I help you navigate this path that you're faced with? I think we should always have the mentality of we are in this together. It's not just, me, myself, and I. It should be we're in this together. We're gonna figure this out together. Also, if you find that your coworker is struggling at work, say for example, they're not meeting up with their tasks, I think it's very important that you ask them, how can I help you? What is it I can do to make your day feel better? Take, for example, there are times I've gone into work and I have like a huge number of clients that I have to see. And because I work in a very supportive environment, I feel safe. I'm able to tell my coworker, hey, this is what I need. This is the support I want. I need to see this client. I try it to my list and say, hey, these are my clients that are really sick. I need to see this guys, but are you able to help me with the rest of this clients? Maybe we can tag team and finish this assignment today. So I think it's very important that we create a very supportive culture, less judgmental, understand that we're a team. And if we, as a team, and then we need to like, move forward together, and my problem is your problem and your problem is my problem. I also believe strongly in team building, and some activities that could revolve around team building could be, hanging out, even at work, having potlucks at work. Everyone brings something, we share a meal together. It's so important when it comes to, team building. Also, like I said, peer support, be supportive of your peers. We all have different stress levels. We all have different tactics of managing stress. We all have different techniques for managing stress. What could stress you out? What will stress me out might not stress you out, right? So we all have different thresholds for stress management. So it's important that we always come from an empathetic place in order to support our coworkers, in order to support like the people that we work with. It's so important that we do that. So here are my references for where I got all the information from that I shared today. if you would like to get these research articles, I'll be more than happy to share those with you. But I did allocate 15 minutes for questions. So please, I'll be happy to take questions now.
Yeah, so if you have any questions for Sosa regarding stress, how to deal with it, I know you mentioned filling your own cup. I think that's a great piece of advice because how could you possibly give to others when you haven't given to yourself first? I think what I've heard from a lot of people is that they often don't feel safe in their workplaces. So maybe if you could address that.
Sorry, repeat that, Carissa, if we could address what?
Lots of people they don't feel safe speaking up about their stress in workplaces, which is a question we receive often. So what
Yeah.
strategies do you give to that?
Well, if you do not feel safe about speaking up, in your workplace when you're stressed out, that's why we do have the union, right? We do have the union that we can go to. I think all our jobs are unionized, and you need to get your shop steward. You need to talk to them and get them to be involved because if you do not feel, safe speaking up, also if you don't feel safe speaking up where you work, I think you're not working in the right place. You pretty much you need to find a place that actually does care about your well-being and your mental health because as a care worker, right, like if you're not in the mental health, if you don't have the right mental health, you will never be able to provide the right quality of care for your clients, and that could actually lead to huge problems. Take, for example, you make a huge error because you're not in the right mental state of mind, you could lose your license, right? And this license is something that you worked for a very long time, pretty much putting a lot of work. I know everyone in attendance today has put in so much work to get their licenses to work. So I think it's very, very important if if you're not in the right place, if your management is not supportive because you think you're gonna get fired, trust me, you need to move on to a place that will support you. And I know that there are places, a ton of places that do care about your mental health, and you would find it. You'll find that place. Yeah.
So there
So
are
I
a
think,
couple, sorry,
sorry, go
Sosa.
ahead.
There are a couple of questions just following up on the same thought in the Q&A if you wanted to answer them. And then there's a
Oh,
couple of chat comments as well.
oh yeah, right. Or someone has said not all caregivers are part of a union and many cannot leave their position. This is a really good point that you have made. Another thing you can do is at work we do have benefits, right? So I think we can go through counseling. One of the resources we have is counseling. You go through counseling, go to your counselor, your work counselor, and I think they'll be able to find something for you for sure. And I definitely relate to this, like not all caregivers are part of a union and many cannot leave their position because of financial constraints, which is true. But I think you need to use the resources you have more. And also when I do remember that when I worked as a care aide, because I did work as a care aide before I became a registered nurse, in the facility, we did have someone within our group that was a safe space for us. So she was like a team lead, a care aide as well, who was able to, you know, go to management and advocate for us. So I don't know if you guys have something like that where you work, but it's very important to have that. So you have someone who's a team lead that can actually advocate for you and go to management. So I hope I did answer your question. How do individuals cope with stress, anxiety, without causing stress to others? So if I start crying and that makes someone else feel uncomfortable, how do I get supported and my coworker who is impacted by my crying get supported as well? Hmm. Well, what I would say is, again, we all have different levels of stress. If I had a coworker who came to me crying, the first thing I wouldn't be stressed out about her crying. I think the first thing I would see, this is a sign and it's a cry for help. I would try my best to see how we can support her be more empathetic. And again, this all boils down to counseling, seeking counseling. I don't know how many of us use our benefits, and I'm actually guilty of that. I don't use my benefits as much as I do, because there's one thing to talk to family, but there's another thing to actually talk to a professional who would ask you questions that would lead to the answers that you really need to make a decision. So I do hope I answered your question. Another thing you can do if you're so stressed out at work, I had mentioned you can actually take a couple of minutes away, right? Step aside, take nice deep breaths. And I feel like if you're so stressed out and you know that you can't function, it is actually okay to go home. You can actually tell your employer or your supervisor on the floor that you're not mentally, stable to work today. You can actually go home. So I think taking that time off, taking some deep breaths, doing some meditation would actually go a long way. Mm. I love those questions. These are questions that I have actually been in this situation. How do you deal with a coworker who thinks they own the company and act like the boss just because they are more senior than you? The way you deal with a coworker that does that is to tell them off to their faces that you do not own this place. We're all employees, right? We're all employees, and you can't act like the boss here or like my supervisor. I'll give you an example. Where I work, right? I recently started working there, and I had this one lady who was actually doubtful of all the assessments that I would do. So this one time she pulled me aside and she said, "Oh, I think you should have done this." And I told her, "You know what? If you have a problem with me, you can tell me, but you ever talk to me that way. Don't you ever talk to me that way. You're not my supervisor. You might be more senior, a more senior nurse, but that doesn't give you the qualification to talk to me in a very rude manner." And I told her off. I let her know. And guess what? The moment I confronted her, I told her I didn't like what how she had approached me. Her attitude changed. So I think we shouldn't run away from difficult conversations. If we're faced with difficult situations, we should have those conversations in that moment, of course, respectfully, because you're in a workplace, but have those conversations in that moment. Let them know that you do not appreciate being spoken to in that manner, in that tone, because you also bring something of value to your workplace, right? They might be more senior, they might have 20 years experience, but trust me, if you're not part of that team can't function properly. So you have to let them know that I do not appreciate you talking to me that way. I do not appreciate you speaking to me that way. You have to speak up. You have to learn how to have these difficult conversations. It's not going to go very well. It's not going to go very smoothly. There might be some sort of animosity, and that's where you have to involve management. I hope I answered your question. I'm just reading more questions here. Um, I think I just answered this. How do you deal with a coworker who constantly undermines your authority because they believe they know more than you? I've answered that. This one person says, unfortunately, I'm a licensed professional, no union, no extended benefits, nothing. I can seek my own private care, but did not address how to cope with stress in an unsupportive environment with no option to leave the position. That is how let it go, leave it at work so that it does not create a severe mental burden. So another thing is, of course, you're a licensed professional, right? And being a licensed professional means like you have years of experience. Again, I would suggest if you're in a workplace, it's hard, it's difficult. Sometimes we're so comfortable where we work and we don't want to leave. But I think if you're in a place that, isn't supportive of your mental health, you need to leave. You need to find another environment or another workplace. And a question I would like to ask you is, would you rather lose your license just because you don't want to leave your workplace? I don't think you would want to do that because I know you worked very hard to get that license. So how do you make your workplace a more supportive place? I think making a workplace a more supportive place, like I said, hanging out, things like if you're having a difficult situation with someone, I think you should have those conversations to iron things out, especially if it's a place you're going to be like 5 to 7 days a week. Like you need to have those conversations. You can also have like potlucks. You can have, I mean, we do have like Christmas parties, which is like way down the year, but like having potlucks, I think those are very important ways of you know being in building a great team and having a good relationship with your coworkers.
Someone asked if you could expand more on filling up your cup. So could you just give
Oh.
us a bit more of either how to do it, what it means?
Mm. So say for example, filling up your cup could mean different, could seem different for everybody, right? Like for me, I know that when I'm beginning to get very snappy and irritable at work, I know that it's time to step aside, maybe take a few days off and just relax. Filling up your cup could look like taking some time off work. Filling up your cup could look like having boundaries. So, take for example, when you get home, you know that you're actually going to, not stay on the phone for the longest time. You're going to prioritize your sleep, right? You're going to go to bed at 9 p.m., depending on your schedule, and wake up, say, at 6 a.m., you've filled up your cup. Filling up your cup could look like reading a book. Filling up your cup could look like having your off hobbies, right? Embracing your hobbies, really taking your hobbies seriously. Filling up your cup could look like spending time with a family member. It could look different for everybody, but filling up your cup pretty much means what makes you feel at peace. What is the activity that you do that makes you feel at peace?
Someone did ask here, how can you deal if your manager doesn't recognize your stress that you feel at work?
How can you deal if your manager doesn't recognize the stress that you feel at work? What kind of what resources are available? Because I could definitely relate to this. There are times where you work with people and they're just like, well, you're not stressed, and a lot of people don't have the awareness. They don't know that your stress threshold is what is different for me, right? Like, say for example, what you can take, if the fact that you can take like a high level of stress does not mean that I can take that too. So as a matter of fact, they're ignorant, they don't know, they don't have the awareness. And I feel like if they don't recognize just the stress that you feel at work, do you have just one manager? Are there multiple managers that you can talk to about how you feel? Right? Is there a supervisor you can talk to about how you feel? Because I'll believe when you work for a health authority, you just don't have one manager. Or there are other people you can talk to. There's a manager, there are managers, there are supervisors, there are team leads. And if they all don't get it, then there's a problem with that workplace.
I know you touched on a bit of, if a coworker thinks they're more senior than you. We just had another question of someone who believes that they can undermine your authority just because they've been there
Yeah.
longer than you or they know more than you. So I don't know if that goes hand in hand or if you approach them a little differently, if you have any advice towards that.
The advice I have, honestly, I always believe in, you have to straighten things out before you go to your supervisor, your manager, your coworker. That's what I do personally, right? I've had situations where I've had senior nurses. When I say senior nurses, they started working before I was born. So you can imagine how senior they are, right? They have over 30 years of experience in nursing. But when I see they begin to, that saying like nurses eat their young, when they're beginning to, go towards that direction, I have to have that conversation and I let them know that, hey, you also have to know that you bring so much value to your team. It has to start from here. You'd have to know that you bring so much value to your team. And you have to know that if you don't show up at work, the team is actually not going to function properly. So you're very important to your team. And knowing that, having that awareness gives you the confidence to have that conversation with the coworker who is, you know, undermining your authority or trying to be a bully, pretty much. So you have to let them know. I've had the conversation several times, and I actually even said this. I said, I really don't know why you think you're better than I am, because you might have more experience, but that doesn't mean you're better than I am. I bring so much skill to work. I bring so much knowledge to my workplace, and I have my license. I have my license. I worked hard for my license. I passed my exams. So I really don't know what the fuss is about. You need to have that conversation with them and let them know. And if things don't change after you've had the conversation, you need to go to a higher authority.
Someone also mentioned that from different people, a lot of people from different nationalities, so they deal with stress differently, and that we have to be aware of that as well. So do you have any advice towards that, Sosa?
Yeah, different nationalities. Great question. Great, absolutely amazing question. I am Nigerian. I'm from Nigeria, born and raised in Nigeria, came to Canada 10 years ago. So I could definitely, um, you know, relate to that experience. So, for example, in my culture, we're taught to toughen it up, toughen it out. Like if you're stressed out, you need to push. But I think, when it comes to dealing with stress, right, you'd have to know your limits, right? And Carissa, can you just reiterate the question again? The very last part of the question.
It was just that we need to be aware of that there are different nationalities or we come from different backgrounds, so we're not being ignorant that, sometimes or someone said recently, sometimes it's we are not ignorant, it's that we just come from different backgrounds. We obviously have different approaches to stress and to handling conflict and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. Like I said, being of Nigerian background, we're taught to toughen it out, and mental health is really not a conversation that we have. So now that, when you're working in a work environment, you need to be sensitive to that. You need to understand that, like I had said initially, that everyone's stress threshold is different, right? What might stress you out might not stress me out. So if someone is telling you that they're stressed, I don't think the first thing that you should say is be resilient. I don't think she's stressed. Like you kind of undermine it. Don't do that. You need to be empathetic. If you don't have anything to say, just keep quiet. Don't say anything. But be empathetic and understand. Just have the awareness that everyone deals with stress differently. We all have different stress thresholds. Just the same way we have different pain thresholds, right? So we have different thresholds for stress and for pain. So we have to understand that. The fact that I don't feel stressed out does not mean that he or she shouldn't feel stressed out. So I think that's my answer to the question.
That's a really good point. Comparing pain thresholds to stress thresholds, because I feel like a lot of times we don't see the mental impact, but we can see physical impacts. So that was a really good point. Fortunately, we've reached the end of our time here. I know that just flew by, but a really insightful conversation. Thank you, Sosa. And before we go, I want to mention our upcoming webinars. So on September 17th, which is next Tuesday, we have equity, diversity, and inclusion as a part of caring. And then on September 26th, we have navigating disability with accessibility. So we have two more this month, but this one was great. Thank you so much, Sosa. And if you have any questions, info@safecarebc.ca, and we'll have a recording of this.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carissa. And thank you very much to Save Care BC for having me. A big thank you to all the participants that joined this webinar. I do hope you learned a thing or two that could help you navigate stress in your workplace. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.